remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website and in the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, also allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting of the planning board, the planning board is convening by Zoom conference as posted on the town's website, and the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. This meeting can be viewed on any internet-enabled device using the Zoom app. The meeting ID is 8295-9794-378 as posted on the agenda, available at the town's website. It does include a link if that is easier. If you are unable to use a smart device to video conference, you can join by phone. Again, the number is 888-475-4499, and the meeting ID is 829-5979-4378. We're going to turn to the first agenda item, so I'll turn this back over to Matthew Allison.
Good evening. Adam has taken care of the call to order. Is there any public comment not related to an agenda item from the public tonight? Not sure how much public we have. Do we identify the phone numbers that we see, Adam?
We will when they identify themselves. I believe that is Mr. McSweeney for the 300 Holman Street project.
Okay.
Is that you on the phone, Ed?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
I can hear you perfectly well. Thank you.
Very good. Is there any board comment? I'll make a couple of board comments. Typically, after an election, we'll have reorganization on our agenda. However, since our elections were last Saturday, we didn't expect necessarily to have the full tally of a write-in campaign for 21 positions available yesterday, let alone today. And I myself have been sworn in, and there were two other members elected into planning board. I don't think either one of them are here. However, we do have two new members. At least one of them is sworn in today. And my second public comment is going to be about the Economic Development Committee, recently formed and recently charged by the planning board. We have had at least one talent bank form received, and we have two appointed board members, one from Board of Selectmen and one from Planning Board. So again, I would encourage anybody who's got an interest to submit a talent bank form for the Economic Development Committee. And that is an appointment by this board. So any more public or board comment? Very good. We'll move right into, we've got two A&R hearings. I understand we're not going to hear one of them.
That's correct. I heard from the folks at 27 The Clearing today. They have some zoning issues that they would like to clear up prior to moving to the A&R process.
Okay, then I guess we can move back into, we can move to 300 Holman Street West, which is, this is different than we saw before?
Well, it is attached to, well, earlier you had passed on the, or you had reviewed the right of first refusal for an 8-acre parcel. And this division is encompassed within that 8-acre parcel. And I'll turn it over to Mr. McSweeney if he would identify himself, please.
This is Ed McSweeney, and I'm part of the ownership of Bray Ave 9 LLC. as Adam just indicated, the first was to take a part of the land out of a larger parcel of 100 and something acres, and that's what we called out as Track A. And once that was accepted by the town to release it, we now are basically going to divide that into 5 building lots. And tonight we have a request to do the first Lot 1 and Lot 2. Basically, the frontage of the lots are on Northfield Road, with on Lot 2, the side then will be going down Holman. And those are in a zoning of RA, 40,000 square foot lots. We think we've met all the requirements, and we're not looking for any variances or anything. Once those, if I may assume, once we have those as A&R lots, our surveyor and engineer will then take the other 3 lots, complete the requirements of the engineering and surveying, and we will come in front of the board to ask for those 3 lots to be accepted as A&R lots. Hopefully, I'd say within the next 6 weeks or so. That's our time frame that we're hoping to come back in front of the board.
Okay. Very good. I did just happen to walk down that street the other day. I saw some stakes with flagging indicating Lot 1 and Lot 2 proposed driveway. And I expected something to be coming. Is that all you've got to say about for your presentation, Mr. McSweeney?
I do. I hope we've basically met all the criteria. Again, I'm on the phone, so if there are pictures being shown right now, I think that Zoc surveyors and Northern engineers have supplied the appropriate information, not only showing the boundaries, but basically the topos and what is required by the town as a package for an A&R presentation.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I will open it up to the board for comment. Questions, concerns?
Mr. Chair.
Yep. Go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead, John.
So I have 2 things. One is Northfield Road is a scenic road. And so I know Lot 2 was actually tied up in a violation of the scenic road law where they opened up the stone wall to harvest the timber. And so I mean, it's not an issue right now in terms of the A&R, but I'd just like the gentleman to be aware that going forward, when the driveways do go in, that would need to be addressed.
I do have a scenic road filing that Mr. McSweeney dropped off this morning.
Okay.
I have not opened the envelope to review it yet, but the information at least is there for me to start looking at.
Okay.
May I ask a question? This is Ed McSweeney. On the Lot 2, that basically the frontage is on Northfield, where we're proposing for the driveway and where the engineers have articulated on the plans, and especially the plan that was supplied already to the Board of Health for the approval for Leachfield. The driveway is coming in from Holman on Lot 2. When we purchased that, clearly the tree work had already been completed way before we got involved. Nobody had mentioned anything about a filing that has already been issued about that lot, so I was not aware of that.
Yeah, there actually was no filing. They simply went in without the permit, removed that section of wall, and removed the timber. And it came to our attention from the APDC, the Architectural Preservation District. But I mean, in terms of driveway locations, if the driveway is on Holman Street and you can meet the required setbacks from the intersection and width and accessibility, grade, so on, then that wouldn't qualify. I mean, it would be a gesture of goodwill to repair the damage that was done to the stone wall. The stone wall is actually depicted on the plan, but has since been, or was previously disturbed. And then my other question is, how does this work in terms of the Chapter 61 process? Because I had some concerns about this tract because of the way the application was made and so on. And that application was made by a different individual. Now, so we had a bona fide offer from a third party at this point to release the land in the first place. We released the land, and neither party, neither the owner or the party that was proposing to buy the land, is involved in the A&R. So
no, Mr. McSweeney represents an interest in the party that was part of the bona fide offer.
Correct. And just to help you with that, and it's the way the owner wanted it, and that's why we've done it. We've already deposited to him $175,000. So we are clearly taking the 5 lots. So, I mean, it's about a 30-page document. But at the end of the day, we are definitely buying the 5 lots there. And the reason we know there's 5 lots is that we've already spent the engineering money. Prior to us going back several months, we wanted to make sure the lots were there. So we paid the application to the Board of Health, and we have perked all of the land. So we know exactly where the lots are going. The engineer has already, and the surveyor have already done, like on the 8 acres, we've already broken out where the lot lines are going to be and so forth. And that's why I made the statement. The other 3 lots will be coming forward in a relatively short period of time. It would even be shorter, but due to the virus, both of those organizations are working limited hours. And that's why it's taken the time it has taken.
From my perspective, I don't know you. I don't know Bray Ave. These are all new names. So it just...
I appreciate that.
No. That's all I had.
Okay, Paula?
I just wanted to know if we have any comments from either the Board of Health or the Conservation Commission,
We do not.
and it was circulated to them.
It was.
May I interject on that? Jim Griffey from the Board of Health has already looked at Lot 2 and given feedback on that plan. And the second plan, he's already seen the preliminary. In fact, this Friday, we're meeting with Jim on another piece of parcel close to that. But he and the engineer are going to be talking in depth on feedback for Lot 1. So the Board of Health has already seen the septic plans that have been designed for those 2 lots. Well, Jim Griffey from the Board of Health has seen it. Not the full board, but Jim Griffey from the Board of Health.
And I think the reason that we don't receive feedback on a plan like this is because it's vacant land, and it's up to them to, this doesn't create buildability. Generally, when the Board of Health comments, it's in respect to reserve area on existing homes with land being divided off of them, where the home for this that's associated with the original parcel of this is probably more than a quarter mile away. They tend to not make too many comments.
Okay. So does that provide sufficient response to your question, Paul?
Sure does.
Okay. And I will add that since Lot 1 gets its entire frontage off of Northfield Road, if you were going to apply for a common driveway separately after the approval of this A&R, we had this similar situation over on Lake Shirley, where there was a lot that totally fronted on one road and they wanted an easement and common driveway off of another road. This looks to me in the very same situation. I would say, with my experience in town, that we would be more likely to grant that off of Holman than Northfield. In that situation, it would benefit the traffic on Northfield to have both driveways on Holman Street, in my opinion. I just wanted to bring that up.
Mr. Chairman, I would tend to agree with you.
Okay.
May I answer that, Adam, if that's possible?
That's up to the chair.
Yep. Yes, please.
Specifically, Lot 1 is the one that is on the corner of Northfield and Holman. And specifically for that reason, after listening to some guidance from other members in the town hall, that's why we're proposing to put the driveway for there from Holman. The Northfield Road one, for Lot 1, though, we're not able to come in off Holman. We need to come in directly from Northfield, unfortunately.
I
So
miss. Go ahead.
I might have not made it clear. So on Lot 2, which borders both Northfield and Holman, we are coming in off Holman. The engineer has made sure that we meet all the setbacks. We're not asking for any variance or anything. We meet all the zoning as well as the setback laws and so forth. On Lot 1, we have to come in from Northfield because that's the only way we can access to the frontage in the house and put in the septic systems and so forth.
Okay, I misunderstood. Then what I just said about common driveways is not applicable. Apologize. All right. So I think it's pretty straightforward. He's got the area requirement and the frontage, and it is undeveloped land. Does anybody have any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to follow up on Tanner's point relative to the stone wall. What happens with that moving forward?
That'd be for Adam.
Well, we don't have a scenic road bylaw, so there's no real enforcement mechanism. Mr. McSweeney and I have spoken about the fact that there was some damage done to the stone wall at some point, and that in applying for the scenic road application for the other driveway mitigation measures would be something the town would be looking for. And I believe he mentioned some thought of using some of the stones there to rebuild some form of wall near the driveway entrances. Again, this is a conversation we had maybe a month or so ago, so my recollection may be a little fuzzy. But we did talk about mitigation measures and things that might be done that would re-enhance the look of the area and sort of meet with the purpose and intent of the scenic road bylaw.
Okay. And then when he's back before this board for that application, we can ask for it again. We can make it conditional upon something like that, I believe.
That you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I'll be honest, I'll expect it. So, Adam, I do remember that conversation, and trust me, I understood what the message was sent, and we've received it, so we will not be shocked when it comes back to us.
Sure, and I will say I've dealt with Ed on several projects, and I've never had an issue with him being thoughtful and reasonable about the things that he's asked to do.
Excellent. Excellent. If there's no more questions, I would accept the motion.
I would make a motion to approve the A&R plan for 300 Holman Street West.
Second?
There was a second from Tanner. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. All in favor, Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I'm going to sign off, and thank you all very much for your time and your patience. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Have a good night.
And we'll let you know
Thank you.
when we have the signed plans for you.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Take care.
All right. Since we don't have our second A&R tonight, we'll move to an appointment for 68 Elm Street for a common driveway. Hello, good evening.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, Brian,
Yes.
you're on.
All right. So Brian Marchetti here from McCarty Engineering. We're here on behalf of Ron Coyview and Harbor Classic Homes for the seeking approval for the common driveway for lots 2 and 3. This is the kind of final stages now for this property. We've been through conservation. Well, first we came to you guys. We had the lot subdivided into 4 A&R lots. We've gone to conservation now and received approval for lots 2 and 3, 2, 3, and 4 actually. And we have received our approval from the Board of Health for the septic systems for lot 2, 3, and 4. So this is the final stages here. We want to ask for your approval for the common drive location. This is a situation very similar to the Reservoir Road common driveway, where up along the frontage and for a portion back onto the site, we couldn't split the property line. This site you're familiar with, we originally had tried to, or the intent of the owner was to demo the existing house at 68 Elm Street. And through the process of review, it was found to be a historical property. So they weren't able to demolish the existing house and barn. So we had to reconfigure the lot lines, which you can see it's kind of a goofy configuration to maintain the setbacks to the barn, the house and the barns. So in all, this lot's about 17.5 acres. We were able, with the available frontage we had, to create 4 lots, maintaining lot 1 as the existing house. So along the frontage here, we have 2 full frontage lots and then 2 reduced frontage lots. And common driveway is spanning lots 2 and 3. Right there along the frontage, it's kind of, there's a utility pole there, there's a culvert there that crosses underneath Elm Street. So because of that, we really are stuck crossing or accessing the driveway, locating it where it's shown here. It's right between the culvert and the utility pole. Plenty of space for it to construct. Been staked out. The Ron Coyview has been out there. You know, he's ready to go. He started the other lots, but this is kind of the final approval, as I said, to get from you guys before he can move forward now and fully build out these lots. He does have buyers for all 3 lots. So, as I said, this is the final step here. So, we're proposing a 15-foot wide driveway. The full length of the driveway is approximately 795 feet. At the end of the driveway, we have a 20 by 40 emergency vehicle turnaround. We've run the traffic analysis on it with the trucks, and it's easily accessible by fire truck and emergency vehicles. And this is, again, the same configuration or size of the turnaround areas we provided for the previous common driveway that we had proposed and received approval from you guys on Reservoir Road. So that is the extent of it. If you guys have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have a question. So you said something about had originally wanted to raise the existing house and barn. So this is we approved this A&R previous?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, this A&R plan was approved. I don't have the exact date, but it was over a year ago.
Okay. Slipped my memory.
Yep, and the existing house that was purchased, so somebody owns that.
Okay.
And now I believe he's, if not all 3, he has 2 of them sold in the last under agreement.
Very good. I will open it up to the board for comments, questions, concerns.
On the plan, it shows the utility easement. Does that easement extend all the way to the road?
That extends all the way to the road, and that's so the basically just the electric that's coming off the power lines can be located within that roadway access easement utility.
So the plan we have doesn't detail the dimensions clearly at the road and how much of that frontage is encumbered by the easement.
Okay. Let me see here. So, I mean, I could certainly add details to this plan. The driveway is 15 feet. The easement end to end is 30 feet, and that straddles the driveway for the full length and the property line for, I guess just where you see the, at least up along the frontage of the property, the front 250 feet or so. It does go through the property. That's shown on this plan. It will be recorded with the deed. So when this is finalized, there will be an easement plan that's recorded with the deed.
Okay. I guess it's just hard to distinguish based on the plan that we have what the breakdown is in terms of lot width and how much is encumbered by the easement. Do we have any feedback from the building inspector on this, Adam?
We do not.
Okay.
And I think in general, what I've found historically over the past few years is where it's two independent decisions, the building inspector tends to reserve his comments until the board has made a decision so as not to create influence, because the idea is that the way it's been interpreted is the bylaw says the board and the building inspector must make a determination. And I know the previous building inspector was hesitant to make a determination prior to the board. And the current building inspector seems to have followed that tact.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because I know we've gotten feedback on common driveways from the building inspector in the past, but neither here or there. I respect that he hasn't weighed in on it. I guess my concern with this is my interpretation of the common driveway permit process is that it's really meant to grant relief. And I don't know that this necessarily qualifies, because essentially they could meet the bylaw if they adjust the lot lines, but that would come at the cost of a lot, essentially. Yeah. So in my mind, this is almost becoming a variance in that if we approve the common driveway permit as it's proposed, we are increasing the amount of buildable lots that this party has.
I don't think you can get much more for buildability. There's a huge wetland system on that last lot.
No, what I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is if we don't grant the common driveway permit, he loses a lot, essentially, because of if he needs to follow the lot lines the way they are and meet the letter of the law in terms of the common driveway, in other words, split the lot lines with the driveway, then he would lose a lot in the process. Am I misunderstanding you?
I don't think.
No, we could follow that lot line. It would just be extremely cumbersome and awkward. And this is the exact situation where, and I apologize to keep referencing Reservoir Road. It's the same instance there where we didn't straddle the lot line. And in that case, it was because we would have had to have a wetland crossing, and there would have been significant impacts to the wetlands and wetland fill, and we'd be within the no-touch zone. It's a similar situation here. We could have two driveways. It would just be awkward. It would be, additional impact to buffer zones and wetlands in the backside of the site. So this just seems to make a lot more sense to do this as opposed to straddle that lot line.
Yeah.
Well, plus it would be 700 times 12 square feet more impervious. It would be extra paper. It wasn't necessarily.
Yep. It does. This results in much less impact to stormwater and to the buffer zone.
So I mean, we have allowed relief from what's written in our bylaw, as it is discretionary for this board, in cases of environmental impacts, scenic road, stone wall impacts, topography. It's difficult. I don't see any topography on this plan, and I was.
So we submitted a dumbed down plan, if you will, just because there's a lot of, on the grading plans, there was a lot of line work on there. The general topography here is it's relatively flat from Elm Street all the way back, I'd say, to the driveway of the first house on lot 3. There's probably, all in all, 3 to 4 feet of grade change from the front to back.
Oh, wow.
And then it starts dipping back down. So it is pretty flat through that front field. So, like you said, the grading impacts are minimal, but it does significantly reduce the amount of impervious area. These are 15-foot driveways, so over 700 feet, you've got 10,000+ square feet of impervious area that we're saving here by having a common drive.
I did get the contours. It is really flat. Yeah. Well, just like you said, till it gets past that house.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we've allowed it before when it's a cliff along the frontage, and then a more gentle path somewhere else. But this is the opposite of that case, so that wouldn't help in your favor. I'm not sure how set Tanner is on that disagreement, because it does go against. It does say that it should straddle the line at the road. I believe is the exact verbiage. At the road, it needs to straddle the lot line.
Such no more than 2 primary dwellings may maintain one common entrance and/or driveway. Said driveway shall be located through the frontage or access strip of both lots equally, including lots with reduced 50% frontage. Such driveway should be permitted only after issuance of a building permit and shall relate to the design and construction standards for subsection blah, 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 blah. And then it says, if such a common driveway cannot be located as determined above, a determination may be made by the planning board and building official for other acceptable locations.
Okay. That's where that previous statement comes in. Well, I will say that the 90-degree perpendicular approach to the existing road is always beneficial. It does look like with a very slight angular change from 10 to 15 degrees, which is reasonable. It could straddle the lot line at the road, at the frontage, and then I think that would entirely fit the verbiage of the bylaw, right?
I believe so.
I still think we're going to have likely an impact down at the utility pole along the frontage in that location.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
I would like to see it try to meet the bylaw. I also would like feedback from the building inspector. I would tend to agree with one of the other members that spoke that we have had feedback from the building inspector in the past on common driveways. And the way that you just read the bylaw, it states a determination may be made by the planning board and the building inspector. So I think it's a joint decision and discussion. And it also states after issuance of a building permit, which is a little bit confusing to me because I'm not sure how you obtain a building permit without the driveway permit. But I would like to hear from the building inspector.
Well, I think that the issuance of the building permit would be for the by right driveway. So you can't issue a common driveway permit by itself without a building permit also being issued for the lot. And then the subsection that allows the planning board and building inspector to make a determination says if it cannot be located per the original paragraph, which requires issuance after a building permit. So this approval is superseding the language that requires the building permit beforehand, but that doesn't negate the other points that you had. So I will inquire with the building commissioner.
Okay. Any further input? So just to regurgitate, this this doesn't apparently meet any of the criteria that we've used in the past to allow for deviation from the bylaw. And I understand that we're going to seek input from the building inspector.
Yes.
And Brian, you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have much of a choice, but, I do want to just, let you know that it seems like, this is similar to many other common drives that haven't met the bylaw. It seems to make a lot more sense. It's safer when you're 90 degrees or more, or close to 90 degrees. When you're meeting the existing roadways, I do have a utility pole and a culvert out there we have to deal with. We ran into the issue with the existing house being historical, so we had to modify the lot lines accordingly. It's a 17.5 acre parcel. It's a very large parcel. And specifically lot 2, because of this configuration is over 10 acres. So it seems like it makes a lot more sense to allow a common drive here to access this. It's significant less of an impact to the wetlands that are back there. So it just seems like a much better layout and a better design. And where you are allowed the flexibility to approve something that doesn't meet your bylaw, I don't see that this is really that much different than the other instances that you've discussed here, that you've approved in the past. So
okay,
that's where we're coming from.
I guess you could ask us to vote on it and possibly not be approved.
No, that's, like I said, I'm okay with waiting to hear from the building inspector.
Okay, very good.
I'm okay with that. I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest, if you will.
Sure.
And I think if we had to follow that lot line, it would just be awkward. I could see us doing it. It probably could happen. I just certainly think this is a much better configuration.
Yeah, I certainly do hope, though, if you are required to follow the lot line, it doesn't do the jigs and jobs like the property line does. It will be a little odd, but
it would be odd, but I see no other choice if that's how we're forced to go.
Okay. So we are going to continue this to our next meeting and hopefully have feedback from the building inspector.
I would expect we could have feedback for the next meeting without a problem.
Okay, so that would be July 13th.
That's correct.
Okay.
Do we have to set a time certain?
I would just call it 6:35. That's what we.
Okay. Does that work for you, Brian?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, do we need a vote at all on that, or we
Yes.
just? Okay. We need a motion, probably, right?
Correct.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing for lot 2 and 368 Elm Street to July 13th at 6:35 p.m.
Second.
Excellent. Any further discussion? A roll call vote. All in favor, Mr. Cole,
Aye.
Ms. Bertram,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us up back to the, we previously opened the public hearing for 190 Electric Ave stormwater permit. And this is continued from from June 8th.
Good evening. It's Brandon Smith from Borrego Solar.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
At your leisure.
Okay, thank you. So just to recap real quickly, when we left our previous hearing, a couple action items I had was number 1, we discussed identifying on the plan specific locations for potential vehicle washing during construction as well as refueling areas. That was one item. And then also we discussed a confirmation from Graves Engineering, who had done the peer review, that the items that I had revised were acceptable. So since our last meeting, the day after actually our last meeting, I sent out revised plans to the town, as well as Graves Engineering with the verbiage specifying the areas for washing and refueling. And then late last week, we received, I believe, probably what Adam has up here, the peer review letter from Jeff Walsh at Graves Engineering, which is basically clean. He confirmed that all of his concerns have been met with the revised supplementation that I've submitted. Other than that, I guess I'd be happy to answer any other questions. But that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, the only question I want to start off with, Adam, is have we received anything back from Graves?
Adam, I think.
Let me unmute myself. Yes, we did receive it on Friday evening, and I found it about 4:00 today as I was unearthing emails.
Okay.
I've read through it. There is a copy it is up here. Everything has been acknowledged. So it does not appear that there are any additional issues outstanding from the technical side with Graves. The plans do reflect the vehicle washing station and the call out for
The refueling.
the refueling. Yeah.
Well, assuming everybody picked up or got their packet, we have the updated plans, right? June 9th.
Correct.
Very good. All right. I open it up to the board.
I have reviewed the plans and I'm satisfied with the additions that were made and the changes that were made.
Okay. Mr. Cole?
I had a question in terms of the order of construction. Are you planning to construct the detention areas as part of your initial phase of construction? In other words, are these stormwater controls going to be in place prior to stumping and grubbing the rest of the lot and installing all the other infrastructure?
No, the stormwater, so all erosion and sediment controls will be in prior to any tree clearing. So any silt fence, silt sock, that type of thing will be in prior. The long-term or permanent stormwater structures, the basin being the main one, that won't go in until earthwork activities, which basically that area will need to be treed and stumped for them to work in it. So it will be sort of the, directly after tree clearing activities was when they will do earth moving activities and construct that basin.
Okay, so this is my concern. I work in the erosion control industry. There have been numerous sites in this area that have been grubbed and then experience a rainfall and sediment ends up in bodies of water. My concern is that if you're going to direct all the water down the hill into a detention basin, in my opinion, that basin should be the first thing on the earthwork process. And even if all the permanent piping and riprap and everything else isn't in place, at least to have a basin, even if it doesn't meet every letter of the law in terms of slope and grade and all of that, at least have some structure in place so that if you get a rainfall event, you've got a place where you can send the water.
Yep. So what I guess a couple points. Specific, one thing that I've seen work very well on a lot of our sites that we have specified on the plans here is they're going to use the tub grindings from the stumps as additional erosion controls, in addition to the silt fence that goes in up front. So that, that's a really good measure. It's, a ton of free material basically that we are making sure they're going to put around the perimeter of the site. Obviously that's a secondary to what you're referring to. So what we have done on other sites is use that area, excavate as soon as is feasible. Obviously, the trees need to be removed in that area and stumped for them to be able to construct that. But basically use it as a construction time period sediment trap, because this is not an infiltration basin. It does not need to infiltrate long term. So that is an option. We can make sure that, like I said, as early as feasible in the process. They're going to have to do some tree clearing ahead of time, but yeah, I think that's acceptable.
And I don't know how we word that in terms of putting it as a condition on the permit, but.
So is your concern that the basin be built before the property is stumped or before the trees are removed?
No, before you start grubbing. So you remove all the trees, get everything out of the way. And then when you start your grubbing process, you start in an area where you can feasibly locate your detention basin. And it doesn't have to be, every spec is in terms of the basin itself, but at least have an area that you can direct the water towards that will provide for some detention and sediment control, essentially, is really what I'm looking for.
So something similar to as soon as practicable upon clearing of trees, a sediment basin will be installed in or about the area where the final detention basin is to be placed.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay. I mean, that could be the condition right there. You have the right to condition the permit. So, it seems that in general, Borrego wants to, or is intending to do similar to what you're asking for, and you can memorialize that in the permit.
Okay.
So also I will point to item 6 in the attached documentation from Borrego dated June 8th. It's got the stormwater management and maintenance, which is a short term. And then a couple pages later, the next page, it's got the long-term pollution prevention plan. I think that would be an ideal place to just add the blurb that after every rain event, it will be inspected for excess sediment.
So you're talking about the site inspection?
Stormwater management maintenance. They list diversion swale, and then maintenance, detention basins. Maintenance is required when? Remediation. I don't see a page number, but it is in that stapled package from Borrego that was dated and received June 8th.
Mm-hmm. If I may, that document is more, that's a long-term O&M procedure and plan for, post-construction after everything's vegetated. I believe what Mr. Cole's intending is more for a construction level when everything's kind of disturbed, and to prevent erosion during that time period. And the construction level disturbances and procedures for clean out and all that are all outlined in the stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Yep.
It has exactly what you were just referencing. It already has a section for sediment traps, I believe it might, or sediment, I believe it should be called
sediment basin. 4.11.
So basically what, right now we don't have that area termed the sediment trap during construction. that area can be used for that purpose, though, and then abide by the stormwater pollution prevention plan requirements for those areas.
So you could have like a temporary forebay during construction?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can make sure that has that a forebay. One thing, just to note, I think we're fine. Obviously, the goal, Borrego's goal, everyone's goal is to make sure no sediment gets transported off the site. But just as a side note, this stormwater structure, this basin, is its long-term permanent purpose is for peak flow attenuation, not for necessarily sediment, because long-term there really shouldn't, it should be fully vegetated. There really shouldn't.
Sure. Yep. And that's why I appreciate Mr. Cole's comment so much, is because there is no sedimentation control at all, as far as I can tell. And it totally makes sense. For a grassed field, you shouldn't need it. But during construction, he brings a very good point.
Do you have sediment traps located on the plan, or are there no traps provided?
So that's generally left to the contractor, whether it's required, to an extent. I guess basically with the SWIPs, the plan shows the minimum erosion and sediment control. So even the silt fence and the stump grindings that are shown on the plan, those are minimum. If needed, additional will be placed. So no traps are specified on the plans, but that's because in our estimation, it's not necessarily required as long as the other steps are followed. Like I said, the silt fence and those stump grindings, which those stump grindings are really the best tool that they have out there to make sure nothing gets off the site.
How about like a silt sack on the outlet pipe in the basin during construction? That would be a cheap, easy fix for the design side, and I think that would alleviate the concerns that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's acceptable. Obviously, they can do that. I think there are. My preference would be to leave a few options as far as the construction team. Some sort of there's obviously many types. There's gravel filter berms they could place in. You could even do a silt sock filter berm.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess a condition that during construction, until the site is stabilized, final stabilization, that there be inspections performed after every rain event and addressed as necessary to prevent siltation from exiting the flared end. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's acceptable. There are requirements in the SWIP already that specify, inspection requirements. So it sounds like you just want to beef those up a bit. I think, we're going to have I don't know if you want to provide more detail on like time frame after rainfall, that type of thing. But we will have 5 days a week, or at least 4 days a week. We have a site super on site who's a qualified inspector to review these. So that shouldn't be an issue as a condition.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, so just to get a basic idea of volume and runoff, like the 100-year storm in this area is approximately 6.5 inches in a 24-hour period. So we've had rain events in town recently that have been 3/4 to 1 inch within 1 hour.
Right.
Right. Now that is going to rut completely a barren site that's not stabilized. And I think not to speak for him, but I think that is the concern.
Definitely. I believe that the SWIP, I kind of wanted to double check here, but the SWIP requirements that we obviously are going to be adhering to either way are, I believe it's half an inch of rainfall in a 24-hour. Actually, but either way, I don't have the number up here in front of me, but we could definitely provide that inspection. Especially, I guess what I would request or ask the board would be to specify some amount, just, you know, it makes it clearer to the team when an inspection needs to be done.
Okay. I think you've stated before that because there's it's considered impervious. The panels are raised above the pervious ground and it's going to revegetate. And the stormwater manager recognizes that, doesn't require for silt treatment. So it sounded like you were talking about first flush.
Correct. It doesn't require the water quality volume, so it doesn't require treatment.
Right, which is what we're concerned about. Silt leaving the site or exiting the detention during construction period. That's it. I'm going to stop speaking for Tanner and let him speak for himself.
Well, I guess if we identify on the plan that the detention basin is to serve as a temporary sediment trap during construction, then, you know, I just don't like the fact that the way, and I'm generalizing here, but the way the stormwater permits and SWIPs are lined up is, well, this is the minimum standard. We got to put erosion control, silt fence here and tub grindings. And then it's at the discretion of the construction team to add additional protection if required. I know how that tends to play out in the field. It gets required after the sediment's already blown through the silt fence and has gone out in the road, has gone into a wetland or whatever. And so I'd just like to call out, you know, my solution, the thought process I had was to construct the detention area first, noting that that's kind of on the downhill side of the site. Most of the site, at least from my recollection, flows down in that direction. And so when you start stumping that area, you could stump that area first, you know, carve out your detention area as a sediment trap, a temporary sediment trap, and then work your way up the hill, scrubbing it. And that's all I was really looking for. And whether we do that as a condition on the permit or we call it out on the plan, yeah, whatever works. So.
Yeah, and I think that is perfectly acceptable and makes sense.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we all agree on the idea. It's just finding the words to get there. Mr. Burney, could you help us smith some words?
I can. I mean, I think Tanner hit the nail on the head with using the existing basin as a settling basin. That was sort of what my original suggestion was. I was actually just trying to check in. Brandon, maybe you can tell me this, if the Conservation Commission required a third-party monitor for the project.
I believe that they did.
Okay, so
Part of the condition.
What we have done in the past is we've partnered with conservation to require or to ask or hire the third-party monitor to look at some of the stormwater controls, and sort of to Tanner's point, rather than going and requiring after the massive siltation blowout, this individual would be on site checking stuff on a regular basis to make sure that as the project moves along, he or she is making sure that there aren't areas, A, of concern, or B, that are showing initial signs of siltation. We used an individual up on Northfield Road for the Settlers project, and he stopped quite a few issues from becoming much bigger than they could have been.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great to me.
Adam, I may have misspoke. I don't see that requirement in our order of conditions. So.
Okay.
So
And, you know,
can we just say something like the area of the detention basin shall be excavated prior to construction to be utilized for sediment detainment?
well, I think that to Tanner's point, as part of the initial phase of grubbing, it should be excavated and constructed as a settlement basin. So even before construction.
Is Adam breaking up for anyone else?
I was just going to ask that. Yes, he was.
So even before.
Adam, for some reason, you're breaking up.
Still.
Yep.
Hardwire, dude. Well, they
How
just
about now?
That's better.
Much better.
better, yep.
So what I was saying was that, to Tanner's point, my understanding was it's not necessarily before construction, it's before the grubbing phase.
Yes.
Okay.
Would be the rack being installed and then the panels and conduit and all of that. And Tanner seems, and again, I don't want to speak for Tanner, but this is what I'm hearing, is that prior to grinding the stumps, pulling the stumps, turning the earth, that he wants some sort of sedimentation control or settling pond. So, you know, I would again suggest that saying something to the effect of after tree clearing as part of the initial phase of grubbing, the stormwater basin will be constructed in a manner to act as a settling and sedimentation pool or something to that effect, and then add that other pools may be required as necessary during the construction phases.
Yep.
Yep, that sounds good.
The only thing I would add or I would request is, or at least make sure that the board understands there obviously will need to be some grubbing for the access road to get equipment in, as well as access to the basin area and the basin area itself. So there will have to be some grubbing ahead of it. So, and
that's why I said at the initial phase, because that's all part of that initial phase. You're not going to be halfway up the hill before the pond is made. You're going to be from the entrance down to the pond so that you can get the equipment in there to make that pond what it needs to be.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Does that seem to satisfy everyone?
Yeah.
All right. If there's no more further deliberation, I would take a motion.
To close the public hearing.
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. This is a public hearing. You're right. Is there any public to ask for input? No. Oh, no. Mr. Finnegan is for a different application.
No, he's our
Cable access.
cable access. Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
he's putting this out there live.
No, he's
He's our producer.
he's a captive public. Very good. Okay, so public hearing, public comment, been offered, going once, going twice. Okay, now I would take that motion.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing for 190 Electric Ave stormwater permit.
Second?
Okay, roll call. All in favor? Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Was that to close the hearing, or was that a vote on the project?
That was to close the hearing.
Okay.
Yeah. So now it's just deliberation and conditions and approval or lack thereof.
Correct.
So I will open it up for discussion.
Well, I think we have the condition in order for the sediment trap. what about the third-party monitor? How are we gonna?
I believe he said that it wasn't in his order of conditions from conservation. So if they're not already there, we can't ask them to go and look at the other things. Any suggestions, Adam?
You can require it on your own. Again, it becomes at the applicant's expense under 53G at that point.
Right, and that's the bond? 53G, is that the bond?
No, 53G is similar to what we use for graves. So they give us an amount of money based on an estimate from the individual that we contact and hire, and then that would be paid down and refreshed as necessary.
Okay. So what are your thoughts, Mr. Cole?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, Adam said that it worked out well on the last project of this size, and
the last project was 3 times this size almost, but yeah, it was similar to topographic situation where it was on a hill that was leading down to areas of concern.
yeah. And I think for that matter, in my mind, it should be a standard condition on big projects like this. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I like that. Can you notate that, Adam, and remind us at some future date?
Of what?
That would be a good condition to have on large projects like this?
I can.
Would appreciate it.
If I may,
Yes.
through the chair.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. We've closed the hearing. Are we allowed to hear from the applicant again?
If it's a point of order or clarification and not new information or testimony.
Okay. If you can ensure that it is that case, then I would let you speak.
It's more along the lines of a possible suggestion for the board to meet this condition that you're crafting.
Okay.
Obviously, I know that it's different than a third party, but we will be performing SWIP inspections that we could provide those inspection reports to the board since we're putting those together anyways. So just a thought.
Okay. Rather than asking, I'm going to look at the SWIP and find out the periods. Because that is further input. SWIP. If you can beat me to it, Adam, you are welcome.
Oh, I was reviewing other conditions you might want to put on.
Oh, okay. So I don't think I have a copy of the SWIP. I have the long-term pollution prevention plan, and SWIP is a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So the SWIP and the long-term are not the same, though.
Correct. The SWIP was in the email Marjorie sent you.
Okay. Thank you.
And you're looking for inspection frequency?
I can Google it faster than find it in email. At least once, okay, Massachusetts construction stormwater inspection frequency is under stormwater management. So it says at least once every 7 days, once every 14 days, or within 24 hours of the occurrence of a storm event, 0.25 inches or more. At least once every 7 days, once every 14 days. That doesn't make any sense.
If I may, it's a kind of either or. Either you do every 7 days, or you can do 14 days, provided that you
or
24 hours after any rainfall, a quarter of an inch or more.
Well, then we get back. Okay, just back to the board deliberation, Mr. Cole. Then we get back to the situation where it is going to be after the fact. It's already done its thing, right?
Well, and the thing I picked up on was, Adam pointed out that on the previous project where we had the third-party provider, they were proactive in terms of their recommendations and prevented issues.
Right, and they were probably there more often than once every week.
I don't think that it depended on the situation. There were times where they were there once every 2 weeks. There were times where they were there 3 times in a week. And usually it was based on rain events and activity at the site.
Okay. Well, it makes sense to do it based on rain events, inactivity, of course.
But I guess from my point of view, it's a question of yes or no, do we want to have a third party? Right? That's kind of what it boils down to.
I wouldn't be object to it.
For what period of time would you be looking for this third party? In perpetuity, or what would you be looking
I think until you've got reasonable stabilization of the site.
Okay, so you're looking for third party inspections until the state is fully stabilized and the detention basin fully constructed.
Essentially.
Okay.
And I would imagine that's what we had at the other project. Depending, I know there we were working with conservation and so on. They may have had different stipulations. They may have wanted it through certificate of compliance, but in my mind, you don't need the third party beyond construction, certainly. And as soon as everything's stabilized, then from a stormwater standpoint, we're covered. So.
I don't disagree with anything that's been mentioned.
The long-term stormwater plan obviously talks about, checking it after a storm event, et cetera. When that happens, does the planning board receive a copy or we don't?
We have not in the past. I believe in the updates to the stormwater bylaw that's now required. Or we can.
I would like to put it as a condition of this permit that we receive those inspection reports and maintenance reports.
The ones that are required by the SWIP?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe Ms. Bertram meant the long-term O&M inspections post.
I'm sorry, you're right, Brandon.
The annual inspections, correct?
The annual inspections and the inspections after storm event.
After storm, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we in deliberation? Have we decided on anything with the monitor?
Like I said, I wouldn't be against it. I'll let Paula be the deciding. Well, I don't want to put the pressure on her. How do you feel about that, Paula?
I'm in favor of it during construction.
Okay, during construction. Now, what are we going to call? Now, is during construction until it's signed off on by planning?
I think that the board can stipulate until stabilization.
Right.
Until the site is adequately stabilized.
Adequately stabilized and the detention basin and the stormwater system fully constructed.
Correct.
Okay, so the site is not going to be fully stabilized until they're done putting in panels, right?
That's correct.
Which is going to be very close to the end of the construction phase, right?
Well, can we say the slope is fully stabilized? I mean, I'm looking for there to be vegetation and a stormwater system constructed.
If I may, vegetation may take a lot longer depending on when everything gets complete. Obviously, if this happens, if construction moves into late fall, you're not going to get vegetation. They'll have to stabilize the site over winter using other measures. That might be a really prolonged monitoring period.
Well, and what I'll say is the other project ran into a similar situation where their construction ended as the snow was getting ready to fly and they had not stabilized. And while the ground was frozen, the monitor didn't go out because there's nothing to worry about as far as stabilization goes during that period. And then and again, a very different site, very different topography in some ways. And they found that in the spring, there were still some remaining issues, but those issues were identified as something they needed to review once spring came around. So potentially, depending on how stabilization happens and where you are as you close up the site for the winter, if it's not complete, whichever monitor we use may say, oh, you know what, everything is looking good. I'm not overly concerned. I'll just come back and check on things a little bit more in the spring. Where on this other site, I know that they were having some issues as the snow was coming, and they worked to correct them through the winter in some ways. And when they came back, they were better, but they still had some tweaking to do.
All right, well, so there's multiple ways we could do this. We could specify stabilization of a specific area. We could specify a certain percentage of the project life. We could specify just simple completion and of the stormwater basin and establish vegetation immediately around it. I mean, not to mess with their phasing, but I'm looking here. I'm looking at the contours on our town GIS and at the plan. Now there's an electrical equipment area, and from that there is a dash line. I'm on sheet C 3.0, and there's a dash line indicating an electrical trench. I would think that everything east and south of that jog around the basin would be adequate for stabilization. Looks like that captures a lot of area that's gonna run off. I'm not looking at the grading plan, but that captures a lot of that area that doesn't even go towards that.
This area here?
Yeah, right there, up the last place. So it goes west, then it goes south, then it goes west, then it goes south. That dashed line it's got a leader to it, says electrical trench above and to the left of the basin.
Oh.
Yep, above and to the left.
Electrical trench. Oh, okay.
So the two lines you just traced.
So this area here.
Yeah.
So everything in here.
Well, that's a big area, and I don't know how that would play with their sequencing or their phasing. I don't know, but it's an idea because we don't need the whole site stabilized. We don't need all the way till construction is finished and we signed off on it, but we do need everything that drains to it, right?
Well, and I mean, just from my experience on these sites, I think it'd be difficult for the applicant to focus on vegetating along that line. I mean, the construction process is row by row by row, and they kind of start in a corner and work their way out, depending on where their electrical trenches and stuff are. So I think we'd be better off to just say something like 50% of the site is vegetated, or 75%, whatever the percentage is. And then if they want to do the bottom 50%, then great. If they want to do the east side, the west side, whatever it is. But
Do you want to say vegetated or adequately stabilized? Because if they are unable to vegetate in late October and they lay a jute mat or a seed mat that they know is going to germinate in the spring, and through the spring it's designed to minimize sedimentation, is that adequate if the monitor feels that qualifies as being installed per the specs and is adequately stabilized? I'm not advocating one way or the other. I know I've seen this brought up before.
Yeah. Well, and from my perspective, I'm looking at this in terms of when the monitor leaves the site. Mm-hmm. Anything he decides in working with them to mitigate issues, then I leave that to the third party monitor and the applicant to figure out, in my mind.
And that's why I ask if it's stabilized or vegetated, because they're the same, but stabilized doesn't necessarily mean vegetated.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If I may throw out maybe something that might work.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I think that's getting too close to deliberation for comfort. What do you think, Adam?
I think he's providing input from the applicant's side as, it's tough. The project isn't controversial, but it's wholly the board's decision.
All right. Well, since I'm not paid, I'm putting it on you.
I think that the board can ask the applicant if they would accept a condition. I don't know how much horse trading you really want to do during deliberation.
Yeah, I didn't think we did want to do much.
Understood.
I apologize for the rules. I'm not a big rule follower either.
Well, I think given the size and scope of the project, these two conditions we've come up with, in my opinion, aren't burdensome.
Right. So the two conditions being a monitor and the stabilized?
Monitor and the sediment trap. Basically constructing the detention area first as a temporary sediment trap before grubbing the entire site.
Okay, but then also Adam mentioned the vegetated versus stabilized.
Well, and that, in my mind, from my perspective, that was a condition to
the monitor. Yep.
Get rid of the monitor or keep the monitor. And,
okay.
As Adam said, in previous projects, the monitor has changed its schedule based on what is feasible. So if they start, hydro seeding or mechanically seeding this the week before Thanksgiving, everybody's pretty accustomed to the fact that that's not going to germinate and vegetate the area until spring. And so why would the monitor go out all winter long?
Right.
And so I don't feel like if we made the condition to be that we had a third party monitor until the site was 90% vegetated, I don't see that being very burdensome if the monitor in fact isn't going to go out when the ground's frozen or there's snow on the ground or whatever.
Okay, but again, the vegetated versus stabilized came up. So it was kind of one or the other, us specifying the stabilized or vegetated area versus having the monitor. And now, are we going to say that the monitor is required until 90% stabilized or vegetated, or was that the intention?
My understanding was that the monitor was going to be there until X point. And my question was, are we talking about a point of stabilization or a point of vegetation? because that changes just the language of the condition, and it could theoretically change the length of the monitor.
Immediate stabilization.
Yeah, I would agree with stabilization.
And my only concern with stabilization is if, say, the entire site gets hydroseeded the middle of October, that's considered stabilized. They put down a wood fiber mulch with the grass. Come spring, some areas don't germinate, you get some erosion. Now you no longer have your monitor. So in my mind, it makes sense for the person to be there through vegetation. But
Okay, I see where you're going.
I do too.
Yeah, we got to work the seasons into this too, right? I guess that changed my mind. I would prefer vegetated. It would be a little bit more expensive and longer, but I agree with your thought process there.
That's fine with me.
okay, so
Do you want to hear the conditions that I have for you to potentially add?
Would love to.
The board's issuance of a permit for the project is based on the plans referenced above as revised and the other documents submitted to the planning office and the board, including all notes and references shown thereon. The project shall be completed in substantial conformance with the plans as revised and the other documents submitted to the planning office and the board, unless otherwise specified herein. Any substantial deviation from the same shall require review by and approval of the board. The board, the town's building commissioner, and inspectors and their respective agents may enter onto, view, and inspect the project site during regular business hours without notice, so as to ensure compliance with the terms and conditions hereof, subject to applicable safety requirements as established by the applicant and/or its general contractor. To the extent that the project requires any other permit, license, or approval from any official board, commission, or committee of the town of Lunenburg, or from any agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, whether as the result of any condition hereby imposed or otherwise, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for and obtain the same. No work shall commence unless and until the applicant is in full compliance with all permits, licenses, approvals, orders, and agreements of any kind issued by or entered into with any official board, commission, or committee of the town of Lunenburg. As and whenever used above, the term applicant shall mean the applicant, its heirs, successors, and assigns, and the term board shall mean the planning board, whoever its members, and however it may be constituted from time to time. Prior to commencement of work hereunder, this decision shall be recorded with the Worcester North District Registry of Deeds. Erosion and sedimentation controls shall be installed along the entire proposed limit of project prior to work beginning. The planning board, the planning board will retain the services of a construction monitor to be funded by the applicant to remain until the site is 90% vegetated, is playing off the discussion we just had. And the applicant or designee shall report any problems with erosion controls to the planning board in writing within 24 hours.
And that's it. Okay. So the 90%, does that have to be as determined by maybe the monitor or, I mean, because that's subjective.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any concerns or additions? How does everybody feel about those conditions?
And that also would include the condition of the after tree clearing and as part of the initial grubbing phase, the area at or around the proposed detention basin shall be constructed as a sedimentation and settling basin.
Yes. And now was that a dry detention basin? Is that what they technically called it?
Yes.
Okay. we want to be specific, I think. No, their detail does just say detention basin. Huh. Yeah, apparently you can leave dry out.
Okay.
It was in the discussion, but it's not on the plans. Does anybody have anything to add, subtract, or say about those conditions previously stated?
No, I think that covers it.
Me too.
Okay. Excellent. Can I ask the applicant if there's any problem with those conditions?
No, those are acceptable.
Excellent. Well, I asked without having to ask. Okay. If so determined, then I think that I would accept a motion with the conditions as stated by Adam.
So moved. Second.
Excellent. Roll call. All in favor. Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for working with us as diligently as you have.
No problem. You guys have a good night.
You as
Me
well.
too.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brad.
Adam. Bye.
All right. That rounds us out to meeting approval, minutes approval. 6-8 and 6-8 public hearing. Everybody has received, I assume, in their package.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of 6/8/2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
Aye for myself.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of 6/8/2020 for 190 Electric Avenue.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Now we get on to Adam stuff, director's items.
Yay. So town meeting was a interesting experience. The earth removal bylaw failed by 3 votes. Well,
27 to 20, yeah.
if we'd had 3 more votes, it would have passed.
Yep.
The
If one would have
same,
tied.
what's that?
If one would have said yes instead of no, then it would have been tied.
There you go. And then it would have been, what, an arm wrestling match to see if it passes?
Whatever Mr. Murphy decided. Yeah.
But so it was essentially the same group of folks who showed up to the listening session and had their comments, and the board more or less answered them and said, you know, we have these few things to deal with you on, and they're in the regulations. We'll talk about them at a future as we do the regulations. They didn't have any specific complaints about the bylaw. It seemed the general issue was no one really regulates us now, so we want you to promise us that you're not going to regulate us in the future. And that was that can't really be promised. I was asked if we could guarantee that they could crush gravel on the site where they're doing earth removal, and I don't think that's something that we can guarantee. It's not allowed by right in the bylaw now. It wasn't allowed by right in the proposed bylaw. So that failed, and then the transfer to the planning board at first was attempted to be amended to increase the limits from the 10 to the 1,500, which was disallowed as outside the scope of the article, and then that failed as well. So earth removal remains resident in the Board of Selectmen. I guess, leave it to the board to decide if you want to continue trying to work on this, or if it's time to put this to rest and move on to stormwater and open space bylaws. And I would love to really take a crack at the subdivision regs and get those done while nobody's really cracking subdivisions, so that as we move forward, we have something that's more contemporary than 18 or 20 years old. But I'll do what the board's pleasure is.
Well, I think that we should address the master plan before we get into revising subdivision.
Okay.
Just my opinion. Also, the conversation at town meeting about the bylaw for earth removal, does it belong? Would it be better served in planning board? I think most definitely. Would it be more efficient? Would it be more thorough? Would it be more expedient? Would it be one less place for them to stop? Yes, most definitely. But do we want to regulate the 10 cubic yard? Not at all. I do not. We have hardly any teeth to enforce the bylaws that we have. So I'm not entirely sure if it was called an earth removal licensure, then maybe it could go with the Board of Selectmen and be reasonable. But I mean, I would definitely be open to working with them to potentially move it to planning in the future, because I do agree that that's where it belongs. But I mean, as I said at the town meeting, I don't want to take that responsibility with the regulation as it is, the bylaw as it is, not the regulation. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think the thing that stuck out the most was we didn't ask for this. We were brought into this conversation because of past issues with earth removal permits not being issued and not being followed up on, and no closure plan. And so we were asked to have a seat at the table, and then we get to town meeting and 2 members of the Board of Selectmen voted against us. I mean, I feel like we just got hung out to dry. Interestingly enough, those 2 members were former planning board members. So they have the most experience with this situation. So I don't know. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly that the existing bylaw being set at 10 yards is ridiculous, for lack of a better word. I mean, people should be able to go in their yard and take 10 yards of their loam or gravel or whatever and move it around without a permit. But there needs to be a process. I mean, to just say that, geez, the law that's on the books doesn't make sense, so we're not going to issue any permits, or we're only going to issue permits on these enormous sites for a select few, doesn't really make sense either. So I don't know. But I was disappointed to hear that it didn't pass. And I think the thing that was most disappointing was the lack of support from the Board of Selectmen. We've had numerous situations now where we've been tasked with a process, and then we've gotten hung out to dry. Marijuana was the same thing. I mean, look at the number of hours and how much effort went into that whole process, and 6 out of 7 articles simply disappeared. It just doesn't sit well with me, period. So, yeah. But I don't know what we do in the future. I'm not a big fan of going back to town meeting asking for the same thing over and over again.
Not the 3rd time, right?
And I think that this last time there was a significant shift and change, and the board was thoughtful and considerate of taking in what they heard at the previous town meeting. I think the board has a lot of other things that they hope to work on and are looking to work on. So I think, this is something that the board's put their best foot forward in to this point.
And I agree. And I think there's no going back a third time in my mind because we've flushed it all out. I feel like we went there with our best foot forward and we listened to the input from everybody that was at the meetings, and adjusted the bylaw accordingly. And we still got a lot of slack for it. In fact, I don't know if any of you noticed the affectionate sign that was
Lancaster
posted at Lancaster Ave. I happened to be driving by when the gentleman was putting the sign up, and I stopped. And we had a 30-minute conversation about it, and there was just no persuading him otherwise. He really liked the existing situation, which is essentially no bylaw because the bylaw we have isn't really being enforced. And so there it is. But at least we had a pleasant conversation about it. So,
What did I miss? All right.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think we have other things to focus on at this point. And I would concur with Matt that it doesn't make sense. I would not be willing to take on the current bylaw. I think it remains with the selectmen, and it's up to them to enforce the bylaw.
Okay. Next thing is the population study. Tanner inquired as to at the last meeting why we weren't permitted to go forward with it. So I did reach out to the town manager, and we had a discussion about it again. And she has authorized us to sign the contract with Donahue. And that was maybe the Thursday before town meeting. So I reached out to Donahue. Both myself and Susan Strait from Donahue were out of the office last week. So I expect sometime in the next week or so, we should be coordinating getting that contract moved forward. My discussion with her says they said they wouldn't have any problem finishing it by the end of the year, but it's probably going to be in the September-October timeframe. Is what she can say reasonably. And she said it's possible that depending on how things fall, they may be able to complete it by the end of summer, but she can't commit to that. They are the lead demographers for the 2020 census in the Commonwealth. So that does take a fair amount of bandwidth for them, but she said that it's a fairly small project for them, so they should be able to work something in the later summer and into the fall.
Great. Now, is that something that we need to motion and vote on, and something that you could sign the contract, or is that going to require?
The town manager will sign the contract for that as the procurement agent.
I mean, we've already asked for it, right?
Correct.
So do you need
it's in the scope of the article that was approved by town meeting, and it's something the board has endorsed previously.
Okay. Was it approved at capital planning or town meeting?
Town meeting. The 50,000 was approved in FY20.
Okay.
So this would fall within that for master planning and implementation.
Okay.
The population study is the cornerstone of master planning.
Right.
And I apologize. I did get the updated stormwater bylaw from CEI, and I neglected to include it on the agenda, so it'll be on our next agenda. That's all I have for now.
All right. Well, that round. Any discussion? Any more discussion on that? Okay. That brings us to meeting schedule. We're not held at Town Hall anymore, but we are on the second and fourth Monday at 6:30 p.m., unless otherwise indicated. We have an upcoming meeting on July 13th and July 27th. I assume that we will have the shared driveway back on the 13th, as we've scheduled. Anything else?
We'll have the scenic road for Northfield.
And hopefully we can reach out to the talent bank form submitter and maybe schedule.
Yes, as talent bank forms come in, I'll bring them forward to the board for consideration.
That's already been in.
Correct, and it happened. Yes, right. And I think what maybe something to also consider is depending on how many additional people file, shipping some of those thoughts off to other boards. AgCom, and Open Space all have recommendations to be made. So if we get 5 people who want to be citizens at large, then perhaps AgCom or CONCOM or Open Space will recommend one of those folks.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that reminds me of something I would bring up in board comment. Okay, so nothing else looming in the distance? Oh, you're aware of?
No, we had someone interested in the property up behind Walmart. We had an initial discussion with them at tech review, but nothing has really materialized from that. So I'll hold off on probably until something becomes more firm.
Sounds good.
Did I freeze or did everybody else?
I'm seeing myself in the little window, but I don't see you're frozen.
Back. Who froze? Me or someone else?
Everybody get up, get back in.
So, as I said, we had somebody who was interested in the property up behind Walmart. They haven't submitted anything formally, so I won't go into too much detail behind that, but we may see something up there in the near future.
Okay. So there we go. 13th and 27th next month. Public comment, unless Mr. Finnegan would like to say something. Board comment, concerns. Okay, so what I was reminded of when Adam mentioned the recommendation for the appointment from AgCom, why did we remove committee reports from our agendas? Probably not enough room with the COVID announcement, right?
No, I think the board decided that they weren't necessarily doing them, so remove them.
Did we?
I'm recalling a vote on it.
I don't remember that.
I don't either.
We can add them back if you would like.
Well, I think they're very useful, and I think it's very unfortunate that other boards are choosing not to. I mean, the whole thing. None of us are autonomous. None of us are an island upon ourselves. We all are working together to benefit and provide for and represent the 11,000 people in town. So to have 8 groups of 5 to 9 people that don't really talk is kind of silly, I think.
Could not agree more.
I concur.
Then we will put them back on.
Awesome. And you know what else? I don't know how to get the ball rolling, but I would love to at least gauge interest for another multi-board meeting like we had that was disrupted by a physical issue. That was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was a review of a specific proposal, but we can look at doing either a chairs meeting or some sort of grander meeting. Just depending on how many people get involved, just creates the potential for some unwieldiness.
Excellent.
That meeting was specific to economic development. It was the economic development component that MRPC had done.
That's right. Thank you for, yes. Okay. Any more board comments or concerns?
No.
If none, then I would take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
No further discussion. Roll call. Mr. Cole,
Aye.
Ms. Bertram,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.